everybody. Welcome to the Route Consultant Weekly Webinar. If you have never been here, never met us, my name is Josh Gregory. I'm the Vice President of Education here at Route Consultant. If you aren't familiar with us as a company, our team ran hundreds of routes across the country in both P&D and line haul. And today we're here to help current contractors who are in the space, trying to understand the changes that are happening, the things to be aware of, and continue to operate as efficiently as we can in this marketplace. And also to help new buyers who are looking to get into the space for the first time to really understand what it takes to be successful here and really know what you're getting into, going eyes wide open, and really make sure you're as successful as you can be if you do decide to get into this space for the first time. Now, before I go too much farther, I do have a quick disclaimer to read, as I do every week. So, Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. For everyone who's here every week, you're used to that, but welcome back. Thanks for coming again. And if you're watching online, good to have you as well. So whether you're brand new or you're here every week, though, we always want this to be a place that you can come, learn, ask questions, and really make sure that you are staying on top of everything happening in the industry. So today, well, if you were here last week, or if you've watched the one from last week, we talked a lot about planning for and what to consider when you're thinking of around peak season for the pickup and delivery side of the FedEx space. So if you have P&D, if you're curious about that, make sure to go back and watch that and make sure you know what's going on there. But what we want to do today is talk through what that picture looks like in line haul. Now, but just I saw a hand raised, just a clarification. We will have Q&A at the end. We're going to make sure to answer all questions, but if I see a hand raised, I won't come to it right then. If you have a question, there's actually a Q&A button at the bottom of the window. If you want to type in your question at any time, you can type it in. We will address it and make sure to answer any questions that come up on this webinar. And we'll have time, whether it's a question about what we talk about today or anything going on in the space that you may have questions on. So, but like I was saying, what we wanted to talk through today is kind of what the peak season is looking like, what to know and consider on the line haul side. So we have brought Alex Froome back on to talk us through it all. So Alex, I see you there. If you want to go ahead and say hello, and then we can get started.
Hello, everyone. Hey, I just want to give a shout out, actually. So yesterday I attended a happy hour that Route Consultants did in Denver. It was actually a lot of fun, to be honest. I've been kind of remorseful that I've never been to a happy hour before. Part of the reason was I lived in Chicago and then the pandemic happened and then moved out to Colorado. And, Route Consultants, it took Route Consultants a year or so to get out to Denver, but I got out there. I had a lot of fun. I met a lot of good people. I met a couple line haul contractors that I'd never met before and caught up with a couple old ones that I'd known for a while. So a shout out to Ken Davenport, who's from New York and owns, I think it owns like 18 runs in Denver. So it was great meeting you, and I got a free hat. So highly recommend in the future. It's a great opportunity to network. It's also a great opportunity to build your relationships with other contractors in your station or in your terminal, and then just learn best practices. And so for me, who doesn't operate in Denver, I just live here, it was a great opportunity for me to understand and learn, like, what are the challenges about recruiting line haul drivers in Denver? How expensive is it? What's the market like? What is workers' comp like? What is insurance rates like? And, and then understand, like, what are the dynamics of the two terminals, Henderson and Aurora, and how are there opportunities to grow? So it was a good opportunity for me to get out there. So really appreciate Route Consultants putting it on, and highly encourage you guys when Route Consultants host them in the different cities. It's a great opportunity to network and build relationships.
And we appreciate the shout out, Alex. And I mean, that is, I think, a really good point, is that there are really particular dynamics to a given market. And it's often difficult, especially in line haul where people live all over the place, to actually meet the people who are operating nearby you. So that's what we try to do at these events. It's free. We always want people to come out, have a little food and drink, maybe some free swag, and meet other people in their area. And the next one actually is in Chicago. It's October 22nd. So that will be our next happy hour. And we keep a full list of those on our website. And if you want us to come out, you can always email us and say that we haven't been out to your area in a while, and we can try to schedule one for you. Perfect. So let's get back to
Let's talk
peak.
about peak. Yes.
Yeah, we are.
So
It is approaching.
yes, peak is approaching. So this year, so if you've been involved in any of your station or hub meetings, peak is going to be a little bit different this year. One of the reasons why is that November is a very long month this year. It's not typically as long as it is, and given the way where it falls off, Thanksgiving is really late this year. So Thanksgiving is November 28th, Black Friday is November 29th, and peak really realistically begins December 1st or November 30th, however you want to look at it. So it's while FedEx is projecting that year-over-year volumes are going to be relatively flat, maybe up 2 to 3%, because peak falls or Thanksgiving falls so late, they're projecting that peak is only going to last for 5 weeks, but the feeling of it, the volumes that they're going to be pushing through on a daily basis and on a weekly basis are going to be anywhere from 5 to 7%, potentially even larger, depending on if they win any new customer orders. So that's something to keep in mind. This is a big time right now as FedEx is ramping up for peak, where FedEx and UPS and USPS are actually competing for shippers, or not shippers, sorry, competing for customers to be their shipper of choice during the holiday seasons. And so there have been times in the past where FedEx has announced a new customer win, and that changes the dynamic. We and generally as contractors, we're not aware of that until FedEx comes down and says, "Hey, I told you I needed you to provide one extra truck to run that Dallas run. Well, I'm going to need two extra. Can you do that?" And so that's a decision that you have to make for your business. And remember, there are no awards you will get from FedEx for like providing a tremendous amount of power. You'll get a slap on the back. You'll get an attaboy. You maybe might win some good graces, but like if you lose money during peak, trying to push a lot of volume through the network, FedEx is not going to come back and say, "Hey, you know what? We really appreciate the effort that you made. We're going to throw you a couple bones here at the, in January." No. At the end of the day, this is a business. FedEx look at it as a business, and you need to look at it as a business. So you need to make the right decisions for your business model. And peak is different this year. So in the past, there has been a cents per mile incentive if you achieve certain threshold marks for the number of miles you drove in a weekly basis. That is no longer around. So FedEx is saying, "You know what? We're not incentivizing you to drive more miles." They are going to give you more points if you hit certain thresholds, and those are, they're taking the average of a 6 week period from like beginning of May to like mid-June, and they're going to average that, and then they're going to say that you get 100 points per tractor on your A1 if you hit 10% of that threshold. You get 20 points if you hit 20 or 15% of that threshold, and you get 20 points if you hit 20% of that threshold. I mean, it's all going to be in MGBA, in your FedEx, whatever the new MBA, sorry, it's going to be in MBA. That's what it's called now. It's going to be in MBA. If you look at threshold points or search threshold, it'll be there for each and every one of you to understand. It's different for every contractor, but just understand that these are the points that you can then allocate to any tractor that you want after peak is over, that then you can use to bid on growth opportunities. So converting those unassigned runs into dedicated runs, or taking a dedicated run that has lower miles and converting it into a longer mile or more mile business. So points are important, but remember, there's other metrics that go into it. What FedEx is doing this year is kind of similar, kind of along the lines of what they do with P&D, I think, and they're calling it something called Schedule J. So Schedule J is an agreement, a contract addendum to the TSPA that says that FedEx is going to pay you, the contractor, $1,200 a week to provide a driver and a tractor for certain availability during certain times on a weekly basis. So whether you run or not, FedEx is going to give you $1,200. Awesome. But there are caveats to that, okay? In my hubs and in my understanding in the general market, FedEx is only going to provide Schedule J to what they call hub area runs, okay? So you're not going to get Schedule J enhancements for doing additional spots. You're not going to get Schedule J enhancement for doing additional mainline runs. It's only going to be for hub area runs. And in general, most hub area runs are at night. Okay. These are the guys who are going around either going to stations and picking up packages from the stations and bringing them back to the hub so they can get distributed out into the network. Or you might be moving equipment around from station to station because a lot of the stations and a lot of the hubs will get offsides. Like dollies will end up in Little Rock, and 53s will end up in Olive Branch, and Memphis has all the pups, and they need to move all this equipment around. Or going to like the trailer warehouses, like so you're running to a Jonesboro or a Louisville and picking up trailers that are getting cleaned up, manufactured, produced, or leased to FedEx for peak season. So it's a lot of short mileage runs. So the thing to think about with Schedule J is you actually have to do some analysis. Don't just assume that, hey, FedEx is going to give me $1,200 a week and I'm going to make a lot of money. No. If you're going to add a tractor to your fleet for peak, whether you're going to go out and buy one or rent one, understand that your tractor might not be utilized every single day. Okay. You're handling any emergencies, anything that FedEx needs to do, and it's not going to be mainline. They have other avenues for those mainline runs. They have the URR board. They have temporary runs that they give out to contractors. Like, for example, I've already been contacted and asked to gross up or to build up and pick up an additional temporary run to one of my locations because I happen to hold the number one in that location. I'm currently in negotiations with another number of one of my hubs where they're talking about me providing them with 3 or 4 additional tractors to run temp runs during peak. And I look at those as the same one. Is it a business decision? Can I make money? How confident am I that FedEx is going to actually provide me with 5 weeks worth of work so that if I go out and rent a truck from Ryder or from Penske and I rent it for 5 weeks, I'm going to be able to recoup that expense that I'm laying out, that I'm renting the ELD, that I'm renting the Vetter camera. So these are all things that you need to think about when you're looking at that Schedule J. So as I said, Schedule J is for hub area. What does hub area mean? It means like you're sweeping the hub. So depending on where you are, if you're in Chicago, that means you're running up to Carroll Stream, you're running up to Crystal Lake, to Joliet, to maybe Lafayette. You're running in these tiny little corridors. So you might be running less than 40 miles. So can you make enough money to pay your driver, cover whatever that expense for that truck is and all those rental costs, and still make money and generate the margins that you want and not have a headache? So in my mind, and this is the way I'm looking at it, that I'm probably not going to rent tractors to do Schedule J. If I decide to do any, I am going to look at slip seating. So I run a large AM run rotation. So I can take some of those tractors, get back early enough in the afternoon or the evening where I can make them available and coordinate with FedEx and make sure that they're aware that, hey, this tractor needs to dispatch out at 6 a.m. in the morning. So I need you to give me work from, say, 6 p.m. until 4 a.m. and work with them so that they can understand that I need to do certain things. I need to be able to do preventative maintenance on that tractor. I cannot run it 7 days a week and not do any maintenance. I need to check tires, fluid levels. I need to have enough time to do an oil change necessarily. I need to be able to fuel it up, clean it out so one driver, doesn't get frustrated that the other driver is leaving it a mess every single time. So these are all the things that you need to think about in your head. Like, if I'm going to slip seat, how am I going to manage that? And then make sure that both drivers understand that this is a temporary situation, that you're slip seating. It's a very common thing that gets done in the wider trucking industry, but drivers generally don't like it. They like to think of that tractor as their place. Think about it like if you worked in the corporate world, Josh, for example, how would you feel if somebody came into your office at 4 p.m. and worked out of your office? Would you be very happy?
Feel very strange, I would say that.
Yeah. So it's something, it's something in the FedEx world, but it's something to think about and be aware of as you're looking at this market. This is an opportunity, and if you're slip seating, where you can actually make that money because you've already accounted for that cost of that tractor in your business. And so, you're already running it during the day. So this is an opportunity for you to actually make more money and increase the operational efficiency of that vehicle.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a lot of things I want to talk a little bit about more. First, just from an overall Schedule J perspective, I'm hearing that, if the major incentives when we're talking about Schedule J are for some of these lower mileage runs, you called out a couple of things, but from an expense perspective, what are the different what would be the main categories that people should make sure they get their numbers right? And is all of that data going to be things you'll have to generate yourself, or are there things they should get from FedEx to kind of think through the revenue potential? Is there any way to get any of that?
Well, I mean, so you have all the information, you have the majority of the information at your fingertips, right? So you know what that cost of that tractor is, whether it's you're renting it or whether you own it outright or you're leasing it, you have an idea of like what are the cost per mile to run that tractor. What you need to figure out if you're not slip seating, but you're actually going to go add power to your network, how much is that ELD device going to cost, the rental ELD? Because you don't want to buy a brand new ELD device and enter into a 3-year contract. You want to rent one for a short-term time period. And then the same thing with that camera. How much is it going to cost you on a daily or weekly or monthly basis to rent that Lytix or not that Lytix, sorry. I happen to use Lytix, but rent whatever better camera that you're going to use, it, whether it's Motive, Ground Cloud, Lytix, or whoever else is out there. So those are the three costs, that you can then, and then the other thing that you need to think about is, okay, what is the wear and tear on my tire situation? Okay. If I'm doing an extra 80 miles per day and I'm doing 80 miles per week, and I'm doing 80 miles per day, that's 400 miles per week, or maybe it's, 540 miles, or am I doing my math right? 560 miles per week. If I'm doing 560, an extra 560 miles a week or 540 miles a week, and I'm doing this over 5 weeks, then that's an extra, 25,000 miles I've just added. So does that change when I'm going to be replacing those tires? Because remember, your tires are a huge expense in your maintenance bill, right? Tires are right now $500 to $550 a pop just to buy the tire, let alone install and dispose of the old one. So you're looking at, on a set of steers, you're probably looking at maybe close to $1,400, and on a set of drives, if you're replacing all 8 drives, you could be looking at $5,500. So those are things to keep in mind in the back of your head. Am I going to have to do another oil change? 25,000 miles is about halfway through an oil change. So these are all things that you have to think about and figure out, okay, what is my cost per mile to run? Let alone if it's an older vehicle and you have a mechanical breakdown. My understanding of Schedule J, but it's not clear, is what happens if you decline a Schedule J vehicle. Like if you're not able to run a Schedule J for one day, my understanding is that you lose that $1,200 for that week. Now, FedEx hasn't come out and definitively said yes or no, but I don't see how they would be willing to pay you $1,200 and then you can turn around and decline it. That would just kind of defeat the purpose. So if they do that, then if you have a vehicle that's down for maintenance, then you have another issue because you've just lost that $1,200 enhancement. And, you running 400 miles doesn't really cut or 500 miles a week doesn't really cut it for you because you have to figure out also how are you going to pay that driver?
Yeah.
Right.
And if Schedule K and P&D is any indication, then I wouldn't be surprised if you lose money for declining, because the way it works on the P&D side, they give you the incentive, they help you staff up in the months and weeks leading up to peak season. And if you cannot service the volume, then you're on the hook for that money that they gave you to staff up. And I would anticipate that 1,200 is viewed in a similar way of like, hey, this is the cost to offset so that you can provide extra power. So from what I'm hearing, it's a lot of thinking through the expenses and basically identifying, here's the amount of miles that I would need to run to have the margin that I want to kind of justify running this additional business. And let's say you found out I need to run 600 miles a week. How confident can you be? Like, can you go to FedEx and get a really good sense of what that mileage will look like?
Yeah. I mean, for example, yeah, you should be able to. You should be able to go back to them and say, okay, what are you thinking? What is Schedule J going to be used like? Like I'm having that discussion with one of my hubs, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to give you, I mean, our stems are about 80 miles. So you're going to go from Noki to Louisville or Noki to Greensboro, Noki to Dayton, Noki to Lexington, Noki to Franklin. So these are all shorter runs, but we're cleaning up equipment, picking up freight, and returning it. So you're doing about 160 miles round trip. So you're looking at making about $400 a day doing this on top of the $1,200
Yeah.
per week that I'm making. So if I'm thinking about this the right way, you're making about $175 a day to provide them a tractor. So if you're making $400 a day in revenue from running that tractor, plus the 175, you're making 575. Does that really get you to the point where you can pay a driver and, make sense? Now, I take that back. Now, if you're doing a lot of shuttle work, okay, so say you're running from perfect example, running Metuchen to Woodbridge, and you're going back and forth, and they have you do it 8 times, right? I mean, Metuchen to Woodbridge is 9 miles. Depending on who you are, you're probably making somewhere around $80 to run that 9 miles. Okay, you run that 9 miles, say 4 times. That's not bad money to run it for 4 hours. If you run that 80 miles, if you run it, if you run it 8 times, that's $640 you just made. You're not putting a lot of wear and tear on your vehicle. It's kind of reasonable. The other thing is you have to talk to your terminal manager or station manager and say, hey, I have this short run. Like my guy only runs from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. I'm willing to give you a Schedule J enhancement. I can make my driver available. He or she is running from 7 to 2. So realistically, they still have another 3 hours left on their clock, maybe 4. So they could run, do you have some work around the hub area where you can add an extra turn on the back of this run? And then that makes a whole lot of sense. So I'm all of a sudden running, instead of just doing, 400 miles a day, I'm running 500 miles a day and getting that $1,200 enhancement. That makes it a really reasonable. So these are conversations that you need to be having with your hub manager or your planner and say, hey, this is what my environment is. This is what I think I can make available to you. Do you have work for me that we can tack on? Now, they might turn around and say, hey, you know what? I don't have anything for you at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And you're like, shh, crap. But I can get you something at 7 p.m. Well, can you source somebody at 7 p.m. to run, and he might say, I need you to do 4 turns to,
Yeah.
from Chicago to Milwaukee. Okay, that's 60 miles. That might be, reasonable, right? That's $120, 120 miles. That's 480 miles. He can probably turn that and get back before 7 a.m. the next morning so that your guy who's running that short 400-mile run gets back in time. And now you've just created a lot of mileage and a lot of work for 2 drivers, and you're using the same truck. So you're improving the operational efficiency of your vehicle, of your fleet. So that's where I think the real potential is in Schedule J.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that you called out these are conversations you need to have, because when you think about it, like the hardest part of this is, yes, in theory, those sound nice, those hours sound nice, but it's fitting those puzzle pieces together and finding drivers that can do it. But at the same time, FedEx is also trying to fit these puzzle pieces together. They're trying to solve it too. So the more open of a conversation of like, I want to provide help, but this is the hours that I can do it. Can we work something out? The answer may be no, but you won't know if you don't have the conversations and try to work it out with them. And if you can work it out, it does sound like slip seating might be the way. And so if you're thinking about it for yourself, let's say you have an you have a PM rotation and you can put a driver in during the day and you've got the hours worked out. I think the other side of this is, when do you hire someone explicitly telling them this is temporary, like I just need you for a few weeks, or how do you go about thinking about that driver?
So yeah, I do it both ways. So I mean, sometimes generally I tell them that this is temporary work, but there is the potential based on your performance for you to turn into a full-time employee. And I'm always looking to get rid of the bottom 10% of my employee pool. And a lot of times guys will self-select. I mean, It's amazing to me. Like, guys, I'll be very straight up and upfront and say, hey, we do not, there is no time off requests. I will not approve any time off requests. It will have a negative impact on your performance evaluation. It could lead to you losing your job. And still, guys will be like, hey, I'm not coming into work from, December 19th to just, to December 31st. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that's great. I really appreciate your loyalty, really appreciate your hard work and effort, and then they're wondering why they don't have a job on January 2nd.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, FedEx is expecting us to deliver to them, and I'm expecting my drivers to deliver to me. Like, I treat them like they are kings. I give them swag. I don't care about their PTO requests. I provide them with great benefits. The only thing I ask in return is that during the 5 or 6 weeks of peak, you don't take any time off. You don't take any declines. You don't have any call offs. The only time I'm comfortable with you saying I don't want to work is if the weather gets bad. And trust me, I will never complain if a driver says I think it's too dangerous to be on the road. I will 100% back them up, and I will fight. I'll fight for their rights with FedEx. And don't get me wrong, FedEx never ever complains. If I go into them and say, "Hey, there's snow on the ground, it's too dangerous. There's ice on the ground, it's too dangerous," they say, "Okay, thanks. Please." When the road's clear, please make your drivers available. We are going to have additional freight volume to move. That's all they ever say to me. They don't ever complain. They don't ever push back. Maybe it's just they know that I'm going to quote them the contract back at them, but
Yeah.
they don't ever say anything about it.
Yeah. Now you said there, a specific requirement is, hey, no taking off during peak season. Do you write that into the employee handbook? Is that something basically everybody knows when they start?
Well, it's in my employee handbook. It's in my welcome letter. Whether or not they read it is a
Yeah.
different story. But yes, it is. It's in multiple locations in my employee handbook. It's in multiple emails that I send out. So I include a message from the owner and
Mhm.
every single pay stub that gets sent out. Okay, so they get a mileage report on a weekly basis. It usually gets distributed late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning, because it includes the mileage statement. So it has a record of every single run that they ran the week before and what our estimate is for their gross payroll. It won't have all their taxes and everything like that. They have to get their pay stub for that. But this is their gross payroll based off of the number of miles and the drop in hooks they have. I have 47 employees, and I think 46 out of 47 regularly open that email and read it. And the one person who doesn't, I think they have too many emails in their inbox. And so they're constantly getting warning messages that they need to delete messages or make more make more room in their Gmail account.
Yeah.
I think they have a Yahoo account. So but yeah, so those messages are read religiously. And trust me, I get text messages the next day. I sent it out the other day. It's like, wait, I can't take Thanksgiving off. I'm like, no, Thanksgiving is not a day off. More than likely you will not run on the Friday after Thanksgiving, but I will pay you a bonus. I will pay, FedEx will give you incentive pay to run on that day, but it is a day of work. FedEx does not recognize it as a day off. And so by extension, as per my agreement with FedEx or Federal Express Corporation now, it's not considered a day off.
Yeah.
So
Now, so I think when I'm thinking about these drivers, they're all low mileage, and a lot of people in the line haul space pay per mile. So do you do something differently for someone
yeah,
like?
so I'll do so for a lot of these low mileage runs, I'll do them a daily wage. Um,
Mhm.
so it's kind of like how I handle the way I handle the UR, I don't know if it's the normal way to handle the UR or if it's the abnormal way, but what I do is I pay my drivers um I floor them on a number of miles. Okay. So I'll say, hey, you are guaranteed 400 miles if you show up to work today and I don't utilize you. But you have to show up to work, you have to log into Omnitrax, and you're mine for as long as I need you that day. So if I need you to run trucks to go get truck washes, that's what you're doing instead of running lines. If I need you to go sit at a TA, get at oil trains, that's what you're doing. Some of my drivers will complain about it, but I'm like, I'm paying you. I'm not going to pay you to sit at home and just twiddle your thumbs. I'm going to pay you to work. So that means I need you to walk the line and check tires, which that's what one of my UR drivers does every Sunday morning when he doesn't get utilized. He comes into work at 8 a.m. If they don't have work for him, which lately he's had work every time, but he goes truck by truck and checks all 10 tires with a tire gauge. And he has a clipboard and he has a list of all the tires and he marks down what the tire pressure is. And then he's responsible for taking that truck that has low tire pressure and either refilling it there on site, or if he can't and it has like a broken um, stem or something like that, then he takes it over to our local shop and gets the stem replaced. So the same way I am going to, come up with a metric for what they are after negotiating with, or not negotiating, but having discussion with my senior manager and understand what their Schedule J needs and what the expectation is. So if I think I'm going to make $800 per, that day, then I'll probably pay him somewhere between 240 and $300 a day. And so what I'll structure it is I won't call it a day wage. And I won't make it into I might pay it as by the hour, but more than likely what I'll do is I'll do a cents per mile floor. So if he runs only 160 miles that day, he doesn't have to worry about what his miles are. I'll just pay him for, what my wage is for running 400 miles or 300 miles or whatever it is. And I'll hire him that way.
Yeah. And I really like the call out of if you've got people with a floor and their work is low, or there might not be anything that day, of like having a set of tasks that they can do, because especially for these runs where these tractors are going to be going maybe more than they normally do during this kind of 6-week period, anything that can ensure that they stay on the road is a great thing. So even if it's little things where you're checking and filling tire pressure, anything like that, that prevents you having to correct that while a truck's out on the road, is a huge difference and could be a game changer for your overall service during this kind of exciting period of time. But I think it's also a great call out just in general for the unassigned rotation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of I'm not kind of, I am a rule follower. So the Department of Labor had a recent ruling regarding the Fair Labors and Standards Act, which is a law that was put in place back in like 2002. And they said that if you restrict an employee from being able to do things because they're on call, then you have to pay them as if they are working for that on-call period. So in my locations where I happen to have a URR, I am required to be able to provide them a tractor and a driver within 30 minutes of a call. So what I typically do is have my drivers, my URR drivers, if it's an AM rotation, they show up at 8 a.m. If it's a PM rotation, one of them, they typically dispatch between 8 and 9, so I have them show up at 8. The other one dispatches usually around 10 p.m., so I have them show up around 9:30, 10. And that allows them to do their pre-trip inspection, log into Omnitrax to show me that they showed up to work. And then they know that if they don't get a call within 2 hours, my manager will usually instruct them that they have to do these tasks. Look, truck wash, you can get your truck washed on a daily basis. You can get your trucks washed at night. A lot of speed codes and TAs allow you to get oil changes done at night. There are some dealerships like Freightliners, like the bigger Freightliner dealerships and the bigger Kenworth dealerships run 24 hours, so they can drop off trucks there. I'll do things like have them inspect the vehicles for cleanliness. We talked about checking tire gauges. As we approach peak, one of the other things we do is we check fluids. So every one of my trucks is required to have a gallon worth of antifreeze, a gallon worth of, actually more than a gallon, but antifreeze, windshield wiper fluid, and oil in their truck. My team trucks are all required to have chains. So they'll go through and they'll inspect the vehicles on a monthly basis to make sure they have that. The trucks that can be plugged into heater blocks, we check their part of their inspection process to check that. Sometimes we have a whole host of different things during the month that they're supposed to check if they're not being utilized. And, it's about 3 or 4 hours worth of work. It means that I'm not paying somebody who's not showing up to work. I want them to show up to work. I want them to know that they're being utilized. And so it prevents your drivers from getting stale who are on the UR, because when there's a slow period, you could go, your driver might be only used 2 times a week, but there's a lot of other things that you can be utilizing them for, that are valuable to your business, and to take some things off the plate of your manager. So your manager then can go out and try to drum up business. Can say, hey, Tracy, you got a bunch of dollies here. Do you want me to move all the dollies back into the dolly lot for you? It might suck, but a lot of times they'll put some dropping hooks on your plate for you. Or you know what? They might turn around and say, hey, I just got an emergency. We need to go rescue this trailer in the middle of, Timbuktu. Can you go do it? And you're the guy on the yard. So it's like little things like that is how you work in the gray area.
Yeah, which is really important in line haul, and it's one of those things that's harder to define the exact way to do it. But as much as we don't always talk about it, there are definite gray areas, and your terminal may have more gray than some other terminals, but they exist. And as much as you can build those relationships and prove kind of a consistent record of being willing to help when needed, but also being successful at that help is really important. And
yeah, and you never know what happens coming out of peak, right? Like there was one year, this has to be maybe 2021 or 2020. I ran a temp run. They gave me this temp run to run, and it was like they asked me to move from the AM rotation on the UR schedule to running something at 1 a.m. Like they're like, it's really hard for us to get. Most of our PM URs are out by 8 or 9, so we don't have anybody to run this. Can you run this? And I'm like, yeah, I'll run it. You know what? I ran it for 3 years before they finally said, wait, are you still running this thing? We need to post this on as a growth opportunity. Now they posted it as a growth opportunity and I didn't win it, but they kind of forgot about me and I ran it for 3 years. It was great.
Free volume, free revenue. Yeah. Perfect. So I think that's the majority of what I wanted to cover here. I know people may have questions on peak and maybe specific situations, and we'll get to that in just a second. We will open it up for Q&A. So as I'm going through a couple of quick things, if anyone has any questions, I already see a few in the chat, but if anybody has any additional ones, now's the time to type them in before I start answering them. So quickly, there are 2 new listings this week. Both of them are pick 'em and delivery listings. One is out of North Carolina. It's 12 P&D routes at $1 million. This has 13 employees and a manager, some spare trucks, and the manager is full-time to help with whatever is needed. And then the second one is out of Minnesota. It is 8 P&D routes at $800,000. So this one is 8 employees and a manager. It's a more rural territory with some really good assumable truck debt. So again, if you are in either North Carolina or Minnesota, those are the 2 new ones this week. Now, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but there is another upcoming happy hour in Chicago. So if you want to meet us, meet other contractors and prospective buyers in the area in Chicago, our next one is on Tuesday, October 22nd. Again, free to attend, free to register. We'll provide all the food and drinks and fun. So if you're interested or in that area, you can register now. And also, if you are a new investor looking to get into the space, we host these regular new investor summits in our offices in Nashville. And our next one is actually on September 27th. So if you are trying to figure out, how to get into the space, we've designed these as us trying to teach you as much as we possibly can in a short amount of time, so that you can really make the decision on if this is the right space for you. And we also help you differentiate between if you should get into P&D or line haul. So if that's what you're looking for, that is our next one coming up on September 27th. We threw a bunch of
before you get into the Q&A, a couple things.
Yeah.
So if you are an active line haul contractor, and probably for P&D as well, there is a survey about vendors right now on MGB. So on my ground biz, not on my biz account. So go to there, make sure you fill out the vendor. This is an opportunity for us to tell FedEx what we think about their vendor discounts, what vendors we like, what vendors we don't, and what vendors we want them to try to negotiate better pricing on our behalf. Like I was very clear with them that I thought the tire discount programs that they have are very poor. I did highlight and I did comment and I did compliment REL with their fuel pricing program and their leasing program, but I'd also like to see FedEx, for example, negotiate better discounts with the OEMs. So these are all different things that you can look at on there. The other thing is remember that MV plus AI is coming. You have to be on and live with it beginning October 1st. Depending on who your provider is, they are hosting lots of webinars, pretty much every day of the week to give you classes on how to be doing this. I'll be on the Lytics one tomorrow morning. I have 3 more after that. I am, 100% in this. All my managers are participating on it. We are going to try to go live before October 1st so we can get some functionality and get some experience with it. So highly encouraged to make sure that you reach out to Lytics, Ground Cloud, Motive, and whatever other vendor providers are out there to make sure you are on board to, one, make sure you turn on your MV plus AI on October 1st, but two, understand what it means and how it's going to be utilized and how you're going to train your drivers to react when the cameras start talking to them.
Yeah, that's really important because a lot of people know the October 1st date, but I would strongly recommend figuring out the process for whatever vendor you're using and getting started before that. If you can imagine, if you run into any problems on October 1st, or even probably that entire next week, you're going to be one of 1,000 people running into those problems, and it's going to take a lot longer to resolve. So if you can get in there, figure it out, make sure your drivers know what's going on before everyone else in the country goes live, that'll make the process a lot smoother. And really, it's more of just helping them understand that these are things that we want them to do no matter what. Like these are all things that behaviors we should be eliminating. It's just that the camera's actually going to talk, and that is gonna feel different. And getting used to that, it's better, like I said, if we do it earlier, before we had too close to peak season, and before everybody else is trying to figure it out and running into the same problems. And Lytics customer support teams are drowning in 100 calls. You'd rather get it now when they have some time.
Yep. Agreed.
Perfect. Question here in the chat, and this is a long question. I'll give a couple of thoughts on it, but they're planning to get in the FedEx business. Can you explain the process for entering the business and the work that it involves? So there's 2 main pathways to get into FedEx. The first is you can always buy an existing business from a contractor who's selling their business, where you'll be purchasing their fleet, their drivers, and their business, and then basically going through an approval process with FedEx. The other way is that FedEx will sometimes they will have businesses that are up and posted on their website for free. They're my ground biz listings or build a ground biz listings that are free, but do not come with fleet, do not come with drivers, and it's essentially you building from the ground up, and it can be a difficult on-ramp. Regardless, what you'll need is both a corporation, so you have to be incorporated as either an S Corp or a C Corp, and then FedEx's approval process is there's a series of documents you have to provide, and then an RFI, a business plan that they require, followed by an interview that really, once you've provided the correct documentation, business plan, and passed that interview, is when you're kind of in the downhill sprint to starting on your business. But in that sprint period between approval and stand up, there are a lot of administrative back-end things that you need to do to get ready for stand up that, if are not done, is going to be a really tough stand up. And there's some things that if they aren't done, they won't let you close. And so basically FedEx on day one is expecting you to be ready to go in that transfer and ready to operate. There's no training period that they do for you. They're expecting you on stand up to know everything you need to know. On the Linehaul side in particular, there are things called tractor files that have to be done to enable those tractors to transfer into your name and your corporation. That can be a lot. They're not nobody's favorite thing to do, a tractor file, but is a critical part of the line haul transfer process in particular. There's lots of other little pieces that go into that. If you are asking more questions on that, we have one-on-one trainings, and the summit is actually a really good place to kind of finalize and make sure you know what you're doing there. And then if you need other help, we have white glove consulting acquisition programs to really have a consultant walk beside you, teach you all of these things, prepare you for the interview, evaluate the listings you're looking at, make sure you pay the right price and that you're successful in that process all the way up to a closing. And so if you have questions on any of that, you can always reach out to us, info@routeconsultant.com. I think we even put it in the chat. But just know that there is a process there, and it's generally at least 6 to 8 weeks from the point you pass the interview to closing. And right now, from a time frame perspective, peak season makes things a little bit more exciting. Line haul is not as crazy during peak season like we've talked about. So FedEx will be a little more lenient with allowing people to start up as a line haul contract during peak season. P&D, basically every week from now up until mid-November, the chances of starting are lower and lower. And really, if you're getting in right now, FedEx just needs to really understand what your plan is to handle any additional volume during peak season, which any seller should have that plan, should be working on that plan, and you're just trying to inherit and understand and carry out that plan. But a peak plan is going to be kind of an essential part of any application and interview process happening right now. It's also not a bad idea, or it's not a bad thing if you start in January or February. Like, you go through all the steps and then FedEx says, hey, just wait till peak season's over to start. January and February are easier times to start. It's a lot lower volume and load. So sometimes that can be a really great time to start as you're beginning a new year. So you can still get in before peak, or it might be at the beginning of next year, but now is the time to really put your foot, pedal to the metal if you want to try to get in before the end of the year.
And I will say, to add to what Josh is saying, is that FedEx, there is no user manual, one. And two, FedEx expects your business to operate at 100% efficiency from day one. They will not give you any breaks. If your stand-up date is, Friday, September 13th, they are going to expect you to be providing tractors and drivers on September 13th, and they are not going to accept excuses. They're not going to accept that, hey, I couldn't get my tractor files done on time. They're not going to accept that I couldn't get my drivers approved in FADV. They're going to turn around and say, you're failing. You just took a decline. You have X amount of declines more left before we will take your runs away. Now, line haul, fortunately, you have plenty of room in there, but you're losing revenue. There is no revenue base like there is in P&D. So, the only money that you make in this business is when your wheels are turning. Schedule J excluded. So it's something to keep in mind. You need to be 100% ready to go. And so if you don't have trucking experience before you get into this, you need to work with somebody who's going to teach you the ropes. Route Consultants is a perfect example of this. They will walk you through from step 1 to step, 55 to get you ready to go on that process. If you have the trucking background, I would still recommend that you reach out to somebody and say, okay, hey, give me the 101 on FedEx, because FedEx does things differently. They are a trucking company, but your job is primarily recruiting and maintenance. Okay. And so you need to be aware of that. Like, you're not worrying about dispatching as much as you're worried about putting drivers in seats and making sure those seats are moving. So that's what you got to focus on.
Yeah. And that also points to, why I said sometimes it can be, I wouldn't necessarily recommend taking some of those free opportunities that come with that FedEx will put up if you're a new contractor, because there is no grace period. So if you're not successful at spinning up business with trucks and drivers by day one, then there's no, huge grace period that they're going to give you. Also, a lot of those that are free are posted for free for a reason. It's because nobody else wanted them in the current FedEx space. And so a lot of times those aren't the best opportunities. They're ones that if you're already in the space and you kind of know what you're getting into, you can potentially add to your business. And if it's a turnaround operation, or if it's something that you know how to improve, that you can make a lot of money on. But it can be a really tough start. And I've seen some people get into really tough situations by taking free runs or free business without really understanding what that free was going to cost them.
Yeah. And just remember that there's a minimum requirement. So if you go the free route, you do need to know that you can't just pick up one run. You need to pick up a minimum of two runs. Whether they're assigned or unassigned, you have to provide a minimum of two runs and two tractors to become a contractor or a transportation service provider for FedEx. Same thing if you're going to buy. You cannot buy just one run. At a minimum, you have to buy two, and you cannot leave an existing contractor with just one run. So if a existing contractor happens to have three runs, you're going to have to buy all three runs from him.
Yeah, that's right. It's FedEx just doesn't want owner operators and vehicles. They want you to run a business. So perfect. I'm not seeing any other questions. So everyone, thanks so much for being on here. Alex, thank you as always for being here and providing a little light on the mystery of peak season and what Schedule J looks like at any given time. So again, always appreciate you being here and giving all this guidance and answers here.
It was my pleasure. I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. And, thanks again. It was a lot of fun.
Perfect. All right. See you, everybody.